All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So, why do you do that? All right, let's share screen, and we want to share screen that one. Or I'll share this guy named Walter asked for friend approval for Cloudy Nights. I wonder who that could have been. All right, so it's been what's it been? Almost it's been a full year since we've met as a club. And hey, Greg. Um, so today I thought it'd be good as we resume for the first time in a year to maybe go over some basic things. And for there's some people in the club who are just getting started, and a few of them can't make it today. So we'll record the session and we'll share our vast knowledge of things. Particularly, I'd like to spend a little time talking about our failures and why failures are a good thing. Um, so let's go to this one. All right. As far as administration, I'm wondering if we're not meeting in the library, it might be better to do this on a weeknight. So I'm wondering what you think of that.
That's entirely possible. Yeah.
I mean, the reason we were doing Saturday is because it was in person, at the library in Batavia. And, eventually we can move back to that. But I think Saturdays are hard for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, we do the Ask the Astronomer the Wednesday before the monthly meeting. So maybe we could do this one the Wednesday after. And because, you will have at least, some images from the meeting in the newsletter to discuss.
Right.
And we can remind everybody on the Monday that, Wednesday would be, that's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's an idea. All right, well, we'll look at maybe we'll take some sort of poll with Groups.io and whatnot. All right. So I thought the agenda today is getting started is where are you now? What do you want to do long term? We already talked about number 2, so we don't have to worry about that one. Maybe a short presentation on getting started, and then sharing the failures that we learned from. So, a lot of people in the club are wondering, like, and of course outside the club, how do I get started? And I thought there's some things that's worthwhile, and feel free to jump in, for any of these points. So I think one of the most important things is you got to do it to please yourself and not to please other people, right? So, you could get into this mindset of what you see in Instagram and Facebook, and you see these wonderful pictures, and then you come out with something that it doesn't match that scale. And I don't think it's a real good idea to compare. I think it's good to compare with where you are, maybe, and maybe you can get better from where you are, but don't compare yourself with other people who have been doing this for a while. So, I guess the idea here is set your expectations to just please yourself and don't worry about what other people think. Because I know in our club, especially, we've been doing this for a while, are really thrilled when people show something that is, obviously not up to the level that we do at the time, but we see where you are and where you've been and why that is so great. And the output is really good. So, does anyone else want to jump in on that?
Well, I don't know.
I think that's true. I think that's true, Andy, for the how the club members are towards each other.
Yeah,
I think that's what I've gotten from the time I've joined till now. is that, we like to share with each other and, like you said, see each other's progress.
Right. Yeah. Armin, you said we were saying something?
Well, it's great fun to watch people, and be able to see them develop. And I'm quite amazed at the quality of some of the people who are just starting out astro imaging and what they're coming out with compared to me, which took me like 432 years to get something to come out. So that looked like what it was I started. So
Yeah, especially those of us who are starting in the film days.
yeah, that was a lot of fun in film days.
Yeah.
I'll just comment on what you said, Andy, about doing this because you like it for yourself, not for somebody else. When I first took my first pictures and, I would show them to people at the office or the family, they're like, oh, neat. Now, what are you doing the rest of the day, right? Even the picture I shared with you of the Pinwheel Galaxy that, it took me like 16 hours of integration to do. I showed it to my wife and she's like, oh, neat. what now, so now I just don't even bother showing people. I just do it because it's, something I enjoy and I get satisfaction out of it. So.
Yeah. Well, I think from that aspect, sometimes like when I post on Facebook, I'll kind of prep it with like, okay, this object is 33 million light years away. We're seeing this as it was 33 million years ago. And it's this size, and and when people begin to understand that, they're like, oh, But anyway, yeah. But you're right. You still got to do it to please yourself, and to me, that's what it's all about.
Periodically, I get a
playing with the
little
toys.
What's that about?
I enjoy playing with the toys.
Yeah, well, that too. All right, Herman, you said something? Or?
I get occasionally. Recently, I get this thing about a feedback loop, and it shuts off the volume. So I have to go and turn it back on.
Oh,
again.
okay. All right.
But,
All right. So
I'm talking to the thing.
Okay. All right. So the second thing that I think is a pitfall is information overload, because you can get, especially on YouTube, when you're researching an idea, or what your next step might be in your astrophotography journey. There are so many different opinions. Like, take one example. What's the best scope to get started with? And that could be visual as well, right? You're going to get all sorts of answers about that, right? So, go ahead and do the research, but just be a little wary that, and what we say, in the club and in the astronomy computing, what's the best scope? What's the answer to that?
Well, that should really.
What do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
Be a dialogue, not something to read, or it's a hot medium, or is it a cold medium? I forget which. Where when you ask that question, the immediate response should be another question right back at you.
Right.
Like Walter said, what are you going to use it for?
Yeah.
That should be an immediate right now dialogue, not 24-hour emails exchanges.
Yeah, right.
But a beginner will not know the answer to that question. They don't know what they don't know.
What do you want to look at?
Well, yeah, I think that the simplistic answer is the best scope for you is the scope you're going to use the most.
That's right.
Right. So if I buy a 12-inch Schmidt Cassegrain out of the gate, and it's so complicated, I might give up on it. Right. So, it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with that scope, but, you got to just stay within your limits and find out what will be best for you. Right.
Well, there are a lot of people that want to get into imaging, astro imaging, and their budget is like $400 or $500.
Right.
And, that's not going to happen. I mean, it will if you put your cell phone in front of the eyepiece. And
Consider the
accidentally get a
person
good
that
picture.
already has a camera and a tripod and they want to get into astro imaging because they're tired of taking pictures of ducks.
Yeah, take Mark Passer, for instance. That's a
All
good
you got to
example.
do is point it at the sky. If you know, with a few tips and tricks,
Mhm.
you can take, you're all set. There's no expenditure whatsoever.
Yeah, like this picture behind me. It
Right.
was just a
you
camera
know
on a
what you-
tripod with no tracking.
Yeah, if you know how to do it, you can do it with just a regular camera. My first astrophotograph electronically was with a Canon ELPH shirt pocket camera on a tripod.
Right.
I just set it for automatic exposure and pointed it at M42, zoomed into it, pressed the button and waited for it to turn itself off.
Right.
That's my background screen on my desktop. It reminds me where I started.
Well, let's see. I started with the perfect astrophotography telescope, f12 6-inch Newtonian and an Exacta camera. And I, of course, started with the moon because I lived in Chicago at the time. So there was no sense to me to look up to the sky. I didn't even know what astrophotography was because I couldn't see anything but the moon and 2 planets. So that's how I got started. And then I wrote my paper on the meteoric origin of lunar craters for the Illinois Junior Academy of Science.
Nice. Great. So that what all of what you guys said segues into the third bullet, right? And it's keep it simple, amateur astrophotographer, right? The problem is if you try
I have
to
a question.
What's that? Go ahead.
I have a question. You said third bullet. I'm looking at cloudy nights. Do you have a third bullet going?
Oh, you're kidding me.
No, I'm looking
This
at the
whole
cloudy
time I've
nights.
been showing cloudy nights.
Yes, you
Kind of.
have.
Maybe you show my
Everyone's-
friend request.
Everyone's too polite to mention
I've been
it.
trying to send you a friend request, but I can't get logged into Cloudy Nights right now.
All right, let me try this
Let's see if
again.
it'd show up.
Goodness gracious. So, all right, so now I'm going to do the screen.
I
That's
thought you
better.
were going to show images from cloudy nights.
All right, now,
Or who the moderators are.
all right, so let's see, share screen. Oh, that's so disappointing.
Well, at least we got it sorted out. Wow, that's a nice picture.
Hey, what galaxy is that?
The
There we go.
coffee.
That's some kind of a nebula?
Coffee Nebula.
It's a cluster of bubble?
We have a lot of dust motes.
The bubble nebula.
Yeah.
Wow, this is a great presentation.
All right, what do you guys see right now? You got me.
Wait a minute. Do it to please yourself. What are we talking about here?
Oh, I'm so frustrated by that. All right, third bullet. Keep it simple, amateur astrophotographer. So, you know, and part of it, you guys touched on this. Like, all right, start with what you have. You know, you don't have to jump in like some people like Walter who just took the deep dive and went in. But obviously, you got the technical know-how to figure that out. But not everybody does. So keeping it simple, maybe starting with what you have, and like Greg alluded to, if you have $500, then maybe it's a tripod and a camera, and that's it. And just add it step by step by step. So I think for most people, that's really important, that you just kind of take it a step at a time over the course of a couple of years to grow into something more. It depends on the individual, but
You know, as soon as you take that first picture and you see the results, you go, you know, that's nice, but something's not quite right about it. And then you do your research, and then you got to find out where that'll tell you where you need to spend your next $100.
right. Or it may tell you that, oh, I'm just taking a picture, but I need to take dark frames. How do I get, or the question may be, how do I get rid of this noise? And then, you know, those of us who are doing this for a while, we say, well, you could take dark frames. Well, in the corners, I'm seeing this the dark, as opposed to this big middle part, which is light. Okay, that's a flat frame. We'll fix that, So again, sometimes it's not always about adding money. It's about adding, a process or two to it. Anyone else have thoughts on keeping it simple?
I think one thing that we could do more of is get together, either one-on-one or 3 people, and like I've had Mark Passer over to my house, and we've done stuff with my equipment and his equipment in the backyard just to get things working and see how one another does things. I mean, that's how I learned for a long time. When I first started out in the film and stuff, I just went with people to dark sites and watched what they did. And then the next time I would try it myself, and then I'd find out, okay, I need to do this a little bit better, or this worked, or this didn't work. Then you learn about dew control, then you learn about better guiding, et cetera,
Right.
right. And at the time I bought a Canon TX fully manual camera with a 50 millimeter lens, whatever lens it was. And little by little I added to that. Then I added a 200 millimeter lens, then a 400 millimeter, then a wide angle lens. And I built adapters to take eyepiece projection photos of the moon. And little by little, worked up to piggyback photography with the different lenses. And I was always trying to add a guide scope to the rig I had, but I could never get it balanced. So you little by little, I started to learn these things. And I learned about using a red filter with black and white film at a dark site. And then I learned about how you could take ASA 100 film and ask them to push process it to 400. And then you find out what you need to do at the camera end to make that work better. But the issue with that was, when you made your mistakes, you didn't know about it for a while, versus now with the digital, where you find out right away what's going on. So I guess one of the things would be, just to get together with another club member who images, or like this, this meeting, go to this meeting, and maybe a couple people say, hey, it's going to be decent out. Let's meet at Peck Farm or someplace, or somebody's backyard. There's another fellow that Jim Griffin knows. I forgot his last name. His name is Scott. And I went over to his house over in Sugar Grove a few times. And same thing, he had his rig set up, and I brought mine and set mine up, and we traded ideas, and you learn from each other that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just to see somebody else's setup. What's this counterweight for, and how do you get this balanced, and things like that. So there's always something to learn.
Right. And what's good about, I'm a YouTube, I don't watch TV. I watch YouTube basically. And 90% of what I watch on YouTube is astronomy. But while that's great
for you.
Yeah, well, okay, whatever.
My condolences, and to your family.
But what I can't do with them is interact. Right? I can only absorb. But I think Mark's point is really valid, because when you can say, okay, what's this for, and why do you do this? You can get some interaction. And what we had started doing before COVID hit was, after like our club meetings, we would stay after, and set up our stuff, and sit there and ask questions about what we're doing and whatnot. So
Get a lot of impetus from what other people are doing, like, oh, hey, look at that. look what Mark has done, you know? How did he do that? Look, I really like the way that came out. I want a picture of that myself,
Yeah, right, right.
you know, that kind of stuff. And then, you know, specifically like today, that ASI air thing, I've had my eye on that since I heard about it. I really didn't understand what it does, but
Maybe
over the
that's,
course of the last year, people who actually are using them, I've been in a room with people who talked about it, and I had a chance to ask a question, and you can learn a lot more just listening to Walter's little talk there that told me some things I didn't know about just today.
yeah. Well, I think that that would be a good one to have a, you know, to do this with, you know, either in person or, you know, at a Zoom meeting like we're having, because that's it's an interesting piece of equipment. It's relatively cheap, and it can do everything you need it to do. So
The one thing I heard about it is it doesn't have very strong Wi-Fi signal.
yeah, that's true.
I
That's
can
true.
confirm that the ASI Air by itself, if you're like 10 feet away, you're not going to connect to it. But I bought this $20 Wi-Fi repeater from Amazon. It's the size of a matchbox.
Uh-huh.
And that, I mean, anywhere in my property, I can connect to it super
Bingo.
fast.
See that? Right there. This makes Andy's point about interactive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right, so maybe we'll do that for another meeting. I think the other thing that you want to think of is, you know, we talked a little bit about, but build up piece by piece, but growth path into the equipment. And that growth path, you know, if you're starting out with a, you know, a tripod and you're just taking, you know, still 20-second shots of the sky, there comes a point where, okay, that can only get you so far. And if you want to go farther, now you're talking about tracking the sky.
No, you're not. Now you're talking about what does it mean to you to go far? If you want to go farther, what does that mean? Does it mean tracking? It means to you tracking, but somebody else might have a different opinion. Like I remember back, I learned about stacking.
Oh,
Because I
okay. You're
wasn't
talking,
about
okay.
to buy
Yeah.
buy an equatorial mount or anything.
That's
or
a
a
really
clock
good
drive.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What I needed to learn was, by God, there's a thing you stack. I didn't know about that.
right. I was
You can get a
stacking
stacking
parts.
program for free.
Yeah.
Wow. You know,
Yeah, and that could be a whole nother, you know, you can do everything you want to do in this hobby for free with software.
yeah. And the growth path that you just described, that you're thinking, is absolutely organic because you don't know what direction it's going to grow.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's also fueled by the people that you're talking to in a meeting like this.
Right. Yeah. So for me, you know, when I got back into this hobby 3 years ago, because I was out of the hobby for like 15, I knew, you know, and I had imaged through telescopes that track the sky and whatnot, but I wanted to start out simple again. And I knew I wanted to, and I started out just doing camera tripod, but with the mind that I wanted to track the sky for longer exposures, because I knew that would make a difference.
Yep.
And, you know, I was at the time, I said, look, I'm only going to be interested in the short term in wide fields. So, you know, camera lens. So for me, that growth path said, I just need some sort of a star tracker. And that's all I'm going to need for a while. And, you know, a while turned out to be about 1.5 years. And that was great. I had an Ioptron Sky Guider Pro. And I got, you know, I had such fun with a camera and a lens. And, you know, that kept me going for, like I said, 1.5 years. I also knew that there would come a time when that wouldn't be enough. but I was going to enjoy it for a while it lasted. The growth, but I guess one of the key points I'd like to make about the growth path is always going to be centered around one piece of equipment, and that is, anyone want to guess? Hazard guess?
Mount.
The mount. Right, the mount is the central piece of where you're going to want to get to. So the mount, when I'm talking about the star tracker, and you're talking about short focal lengths, it's, guiding isn't all that important, of making sure that your picture is nice and no star trails and whatnot. As you get into longer focal lengths, it becomes important. And that's where the mounts come in. The quality of your mount is going to be where you want to spend your money. Right. So anyone want to say anything about that?
You're right.
Yeah. Has anyone tried to make a bad mount work for astrophotography?
Make a what mount?
A mount that wasn't a high quality.
I have.
Every one of us is doing
Yeah,
that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think we all did that at one time, but
Absolutely.
Yeah, my 8SE is not great for deep sky imaging, but I'm getting something. So
Right. And you accept the limitations of it, right?
yeah, but you have to know about it.
Yeah, ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
That's the
You
key.
have to understand what your limitations are.
Yeah. See, and I think too many people, they jump into buying something expecting it to be really good, and it turns out that they're not, and then they just quit.
No, but like I think Walter was saying, my mother doesn't know the difference between my images on my 8SC and Walter's 16-hour image that he did, right? So the other thing is there are many different ways to get to the same finish line.
Yeah.
And the finish line may look different to many people.
Yeah, absolutely true.
So, and everyone wants images that might look like Hubble, but you're going to get what you get, and you have to try to make the best of what you have. I think post-processing is part of it. You'll probably get to that later, but there are three pieces to the whole thing. You got to have the equipment, scene conditions, and the ability to post-process, like Walter showed us. He had some good tricks in Photoshop.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you also have to know how to do it. So I guess that's the fourth unmentionable.
Yeah, that's true. And I wasn't even gonna get to that one yet today, but
Yeah, see, that's why I said it's unmentionable.
right.
I basically started out in observational astronomy, so all of my equipment, that's serious equipment, is not built for astrophotography. It's large telescopes, large mounts, things like that, 14, 12-inch, but I still do it by bolting something smaller on the top of them, or like the one that's behind me, that's through a 12-inch, Cassegrain.
Right.
So,
we only see the lagoon behind you there, Herman, stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, I was just mostly visual since 1970 up until probably 5 years ago. And I had tried taking astro images with a film camera, and that was so bad. I don't even really want to talk about it beyond that part. But I had no intention of doing any kind of imaging. And all of a sudden it just happened. And, it is, so you just can't, you don't know until you actually try it and experiment what you're going to get.
Right.
And you shouldn't be discouraged, I guess, is the other
No.
thing, because I think like just putting your camera on a tripod and taking like a 20-second image, if the stars are not streaks and they're little dots and they're pretty finely focused, you're still probably going to have a washed out background, and you could get discouraged at that until you realize that there's very simple ways to deal with that. So
Right.
I didn't understand that until probably a couple of years ago. I thought I was going to have a washed out image, and I had no hope unless I do dark frames and all these other things I didn't really want to learn about, frankly. And So there's ways around everything. So that's the other thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, right? All right, so next thing is something that I really picked up from Mark Wagner here, and I believe it is super important as you get into the hobby more, and that is about a workflow. You know, once you're starting out, and you know there's, you know, and it's really simple. It's not a big deal, but this, you know, as you go on to take to more and more things and more steps, you can get bitten by the bug of forgetting something in a workflow. And it may be something as simple as, okay, I've gone out to a dark site. I have all my equipment, but I don't have a flashlight. Right? And so has anyone tried to look at the back or the camera settings on top of a DSLR without a flashlight at night?
Hard to do.
It's impossible for me, at least with my camera, I couldn't do it. So, you know, part of a simple workflow would be, okay, I'm going out to a dark site. I need this, all my equipment that I know I'm going to need. And then, you know, having it written down and following it. Because nothing is more frustrating than, and I've done this a number of times where I've gone out to the club site and I've forgotten some vital piece of equipment. And I'm like, I just ruined my whole night. And then one time I went out to Lee and I went back home to get it and came back. So, you know, that's an hour and 20 minutes I threw away by not having a workflow of or a checklist in this case, right?
Yeah, I think we all learned that because even in observational astronomy, we always kept logs of what we were doing and how we did it and what equipment was used and step by step. And every time you don't, you have a bad night. It's the first thing you learn. Every time you don't, you have a bad night. And I've had more than those because I've seen something I wanted, just grab some piece of equipment, run out to the backyard and say, oh crap, you know. So we, oh, look at Comet Land, you know, last year, you know, so, oh, I better run out there and see if I can grab that comet with my tripod and my camera and what the heck, you know, and without thinking about anything, you know.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things about going to a dark site, especially in the summertime, is the nights are short. And if you want to accomplish something, you need to use every minute that you can in being productive. Yeah. And, you know, when I set up for imaging at home, I use the same routine every time. And it's not that I've memorized it, but I know when I miss something.
Yeah.
Whoops, I did this out of sequence or something. And then like Herman said, no, you're all discombobulated, whatever. You start having a bad night. But especially if you go to a dark site, you want to have the maximum amount of image acquisition at the dark site. And so if you planned out and you have a workflow for how you set up your telescope and in what sequence, and if you cool down your camera, do that. And if you take dark frames, do that, or flat frames, whatever sequence it is. So one of the things that I do is I set up as soon as I see the North Star, I have everything ready to go. If I see the North Star visually, then I know I can get it in my polar alignment scope and I get the scope lined up. Then I assemble the whole mechanically, get it all set together, make sure all the cables are in the right places, make sure I have my windshield reflector thing over the cable so I don't trip over the cables.
Yep.
Then what I do is do my star alignment as soon as I can. And I always do this through a hydrogen alpha filter so I'm not burning out pixels with a bright star.
That's good. Yeah, you have a special type of camera though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying what my routine is. And
Yeah.
then, so then after that, I guide on a bright star, calibrate and guide on a bright star. Then I take my dark frames. So I'm doing all of this in twilight. So I'm productive actually imaging during twilight because I'm letting the mount calibrate itself for what I want to. I usually calibrate near the area I want to start imaging with. And the camera's cooling down and taking the dark frame. So then I take 5 minute, so that's 30 minutes it's guiding before I even start to guide. So it takes the backlash out of it, all that kind of stuff. So I'm at the best I can be, let's say 40 minutes after I see the North Star. And then I'm getting close to where, okay, now you can start to image.
Right. Right.
And so those steps, if I don't do those steps and I don't do them in the right order, I usually don't have a good night.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's what I'm trying to get at, what Herman was saying.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that-
exactly right.
Is that I know how my equipment works or how it should work. So if I do all these steps and I start seeing errors, then I can figure out what the errors are. Okay, so is my battery maybe not high? What voltage is is my alignment not that good? Do I have to redo my 3-star alignment and calibration stars? Because I know what it's supposed to do. And if I do everything the same each time, it should work.
Yep.
In that way. And I think that's the other thing, that you don't want to have to problem solve major things at the dark side.
Yep.
Because I know that gets frustrating.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Now it's fine when you have this learning curve and you're learning how to do it, then that's fine. But once you get problem solved, that should be part of your workflow and your routine.
You no longer have anyone to blame but the 3 fingers pointing back at you, right?
Yeah. And as far as bringing stuff, I've got everything in plastic tubs, sort of whatever, different sizes. Everything goes where it's supposed to. I've got extra of everything. In fact, people usually ask me, hey, do you have an extra this? Do you have an extra that? I'm not saying I have everything, but
Yeah.
I always bring extra stuff. You know, I've got AA and A batteries and C and D batteries just thrown into a tub, again, for flashlights, for whatever. And what I'm trying to do now is get a good workflow for that DSLR camera. And I'm getting better at that too. What I should be doing, setting that up and getting that going. So I think the workflow thing, Andy, I had a presentation last time we were together, last year or something, 2 years ago. And it's like a 6 Sigma thing.
Yep.
Each time you get a little bit better. And I remember an old friend of mine, this was in the 70s, we used to go out and he was a photographer and I was just doing observing. He says, each of these nights are golden and you got to spend it the best way you can.
Right.
I hate to drive out to Apple River Canyon, have a beautiful dark sky, and I forget something.
Yep.
Hey, one of the guys, I don't think anyone here, I'm not talking about anyone on the call, but one of the guys that was in the club drove out and he had no counterweights. Well, how do you forget counterweights? I don't know. But he had to drive back and get them, otherwise he does nothing. So
Yeah.
so there's all different ways to do the workflow and the checklist. And
Yeah. So that's a really good point. So there's a difference between the workflow and the checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the checklist tells you everything that you should be bringing, even outside, even to the backyard.
yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter. So, but as far as the workflow, has anyone spent time troubleshooting why something wasn't working because a lens cap or was it still on the camera or the telescope? I was
Never.
never. I spent a half hour, it was probably about 9 months ago, where my guiding was horrible. because I was guiding on a hot pixel because the lens cap was still on the guide scope, right?
Oh, my God. Oh, boy.
Simple workflow thing. I ignored. I forgot to take the cap off. And if so frustrated with myself was, why did I get lazy about this? Because I'm lazy by design, but I know better in this case, right?
That's one hell of a slogan, guiding on a hot pixel.
No, I thought lazy by design was a great slogan too.
Yeah, that's another one.
Andy Weeks, lazy by design.
It makes it sound so intellectual.
So anyway, that's, for the beginners who are listening, what we want you to know is you need a checklist of items you're going to use and a workflow of how you're going to use them.
And I think, Andy, the workflow also includes breakdown, so you don't forget something.
Oh, wow. Yeah, right.
I keep a ditty bag of all the stuff that you always need, like the flashlight, the mosquito repellent, the non-technical things that you're just gonna need,
Yeah.
and I just grab that, and it changes with the seasons, hand warmers in the winter and skeeter juice in the summer.
Yep. Very good point. All right. So next thing wanted to spend some time talking about is failures are a good thing. I think sometimes, the beginners get in and they just want the good picture. And, not realizing that the road to success is more Thomas Edison than it is anything else. So I know 1,000 ways of how not to take a good astrophoto, because I've failed in so many different ways, but that's okay. Because I can learn from those things. As long as I don't repeat them.
Good judgment comes from experience.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
experience comes from bad judgment.
There you go. Right. So, in at least in the Western culture, we're kind of programmed mentally that failure is a bad thing, right? In our school system, failure is unacceptable. And for me, the things I didn't do well in school is because I didn't care. But but I think in general in life, failures are not a bad thing. They're something to be learned from and embraced and say, okay, all right, I did it wrong this way. Now I know next time not to do it. And in astrophotography, this is so true. But you just don't want to make the same mistakes over and over again. I don't want to guide on a hot pixel 2 nights in a row, right? So, I probably will never guide on a hot pixel again because I learned the lesson because it was so frustrating.
I'll just write that down.
Don't ever guide on a hot pixel. I take
That's rule number
chucklehead.
1. Rule number 2 is follow all rules.
Yeah. No, I take chucklehead notes because every time I go out somewhere, I make a chucklehead move. And
Yeah.
My very first, the Iowa Star Party a year ago, because we didn't have one last year. I forgot stuff that I needed, and I was out there, and I was going to be out there for 3 or 4 days, and there was no way for me to get stuff. But they weren't killing things, but practically everyone there forgot 2 or 3 things they needed, and or dropped things or lost things. So I was involved with a huge crowd of 30 or 40 people who had all done the same thing. When you set up a 26-inch Dob and you can't get the damn thing to work for 3 days, well, you've forgotten something, But so I didn't feel too bad, but I know that I've got to avoid that in the early planning, since I'd never been to a large star party like that before. I wasn't able to put my little list of things I needed to check out.
Right.
I didn't have it. Okay. I just thought I had stuff. And so that was good. It was a good experience.
Yeah, and so even for simple things like, okay, I want to take a picture on my tripod with the Orion Nebula, the Orion Nebula. Well, maybe you can't find it, right? Well, okay, so what do you learn from that? Well, learns from maybe I need to understand the sky a little bit better, and I got to take the time to do that, right? Well, we mentioned before about, well, the pictures are very noisy, so I need to stack, right? And the first time we stack pictures, they usually don't come out very well, right? We find out, oh, I did this wrong. I had this setting wrong in the stacking software or whatever. So failures are to be expected. They're good and they're to be expected. So learn from them. Take notes if you need to, and you get better at things over time.
A couple of years ago, I was out at the dark site and I had one particularly great night. And I took, I don't know, I think I had about 15 subjects, deep sky objects that they had taken some pictures of, and multiple pictures too. The scope was perfect. The mount was had a really good alignment, particularly good for me. And I got a whole bunch of photographs. And that night just happened to be one of those nights where I was into discipline. I'm very undisciplined. I go out because it's fun, not because I want to remember everything. But that night I had decided I was writing. During those days I was writing stuff down. And I kept a log of what time it was and what object I was taking a picture of. When I got home and I unloaded the stuff, I had a lot of great things, but I didn't know what they were. Clusters.
Mm-hmm.
I had one cluster look like another to me, especially on a screen here. My eyes just don't see. It's just a bunch of white dots all over the screen. In a telescope, that's a different thing, but a bunch of white dots of different sizes. My mind doesn't read that as bright stars and stuff. Anyway, thank God I took those notes by time.
Yeah.
At 1:15 a.m., I was taking a picture of what I thought was M3. At 2 o'clock, I started on something else. And I was able to sort through about 500 images and categorize them into subdirectories where they belonged by object. Of course, later on, I found about plate solving, but that's a different story.
Right. Well, it's kind of fun is I think I was there that night, Bob, where you were taking them, because I remember you just going from object to object and doing so well with it.
Very much possible, because I don't have a lot of those nights.
Yeah, I know. But I think what's even more cool about that is that was like 4 years ago or something. You still,
it was 17, 18, something like that.
Oh, okay, all right. You still are going back and reprocessing those things today.
Those are the ones that I'm reprocessing with Affinity, because back then I was doing it with, I think I had Photoshop, the cheap version of Photoshop that didn't do anything.
Yeah, right.
The one you can buy. And then I switched to something, what's the other one?
Deep Sky.
Light, I don't know.
Lightroom? Yeah.
No, not Lightroom. The Corel.
Insight.
The Corel product.
Corel, yeah.
Corel. Paint Shop Pro. And they don't claim to be photo anything. But wasn't getting good luck with that. But now that I've got Affinity and all the things that it does, I'm going back all the way to 2014 to get some, when I get some good shots, I'm going back and reprocessing them. I'm surprising myself. Well, A, I've got more technique, but B, I've got better tools now.
Yeah.
Same images, but better tools.
Yeah. and you've learned so much about what to do. You failed in your processing skills, not because you were, bad at it. It's because you didn't have the skill set. And now
Growth.
you have the skill set.
As you in the previous slide, a growth path
Right.
a growth path doesn't involve money necessarily. I mean, it involved $25 for Affinity, but
Right.
the growth path was really learning about how to correct shortcomings in an original image.
Right. Right. Okay. Anything else on anyone wants to share about failures?
Oh, by the way, taking notes, just use a voice recorder.
That's true too, right? That's a good one.
That's what I did for observations, and I also try to do it for imaging, but I need to get a new one. But it's an
When
easy
I'm
way to
doing
keep it.
planetary, I use my DSLR on movie and
Yeah.
it records audio at the same time. So I'm
Yeah.
sitting,
Yeah,
you know,
mine does too, and I keep forgetting about that because it's pretty bad audio. You hear,
yeah.
what the hell
Some
is
of the
going on?
conversations picked up.
Snapping, garbage, snap.
It also picked up some conversations that I had to learn how to erase.
Mhm.
Right.
All right. Yeah. So. All right. So I think that was what I was hoping to cover at a high level. Like to throw it open to now just general discussion of, okay, what are some of the things that each of you have learned, thinking putting on your hat of a beginner in this hobby, maybe one or two things you think are really really important that you could share.
Well, be patient with yourself,
Yes.
because you will not get what you expect for a while. And
Right.
then don't give up. So, and it's hard because people can get frustrated, especially if they spent a good piece of money for, you see a astrophotography gear showing up on cloudy nights and elsewhere real fast.
Right.
But,
Yeah.
yeah,
I think in line with that is if you can set your expectations of success low and maybe incremental, you can celebrate them more, right?
Yeah.
If my picture improves 10% by something I've done in processing or acquiring the image or whatever, that's something to celebrate, and you should be happy for that.
And that's one of the real advantages of having a group to discuss, because you come back from your first session disappointed, no matter, what, first emphasis on first session,
yeah,
it didn't work. Something wasn't right. You have somebody to discuss it with, we can look at the picture and say, well, you need to do this, we can give a laundry list of things to make that picture better. But when you bring it into a group like this, it's just support, like, oh, look, I don't like it because something's wrong with it. Oh, well, here's how you fix that.
Right.
And then you go out and you fix that. Oh, now you've accomplished something.
Yeah, and you got something to celebrate.
Well, I think it's good to try imaging things every year that you've imaged the previous years to kind
That's
of
a great
gauge
idea.
what improvements you have. I had a really embarrassing experience with M42 last year. And then this year, there was a little bit of an improvement, but it was like not even night and day. When you look back at the old image that I was so proud of, it was kind of embarrassing. So if you image things year after year, you'll kind of be aware of whatever kind of progress you're making, whether it's in processing or just, well, no experience, right? Knowing what to do when you're taking the image. and even post-processing. So,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, and for the most part, going out to Lee definitely helps because I can't get some of the images from my driveway that I've gotten at Lee. So there
Yeah,
is
that's true.
definitely that.
What else? You
Well, I
find-
track my interest in astrophotography back to 3 images. If you remember my talk about Mount Palomar, I was bit with the bug by reading about it. And then Sky and Telescope, where somebody came out with color plates. And the only telescope capable of taking color pictures back then was Mount Palomar. And there were 16 by 20 posters you could buy of Andromeda, M42, and something else. And I was just so struck with that. I said, I got to get a picture of that. And here I am today, still trying to get a picture of that.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah,
But it's been fun.
yeah. Well, the fun part is sometimes we forget about it.
If it isn't fun, you got to stop. There's a guy called the lighthearted astronomer. He wrote a book, and it's a it's a little paperback, maybe 60 pages long, about answering all the things we talk about. What kind of telescope to get, and his experiences. The biggest thing was he got fed up with astronomy. And he wrote a follow-on book last year or 2 years ago. And his point was, I hated astronomy by the time, I was tired of it was just not fun anymore. He says that's the best thing you can do, is to just walk away from it till you feel like coming back. Because if it isn't fun, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And when you come back, his point was, it's a lot more fun than it was the first time around.
Right, right. And that goes back to the expectations thing, right?
Well, I was getting fed up of about, well, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, or maybe, I don't know. Anyway, I went out to the dark site with a lawn chair and no telescope, because I had gotten to that point. And I was going to watch you guys take your pictures and do your shtick. And I was just going to sit there and look at the sky, like what got me started in 1950, before Sky and Telescope and Mount Palomar. I just loved laying in the grass and looking at the sky, thinking about how dark and deep that is.
Yeah.
How far away is that stuff? And I wanted to recapture the very beginning. And I had just finished reading his book, this guy's book, about when you're fed up, take a break. Don't fight it.
Yeah.
By God, that worked. I came out 3 times and did nothing. I just hobnobbed with you guys. When somebody started cursing at their rig, I went over and said, "What's going on?" And Christensen is really good at that, by the way.
I was wondering if you were going to mention them or not. Okay, excellent. At least we got that on the recording here. So that was
Yeah,
He's
We'll
got
see
a
if he's-
vocabulary, let me tell you.
We'll see if he watches YouTube or not.
And I think he has steel-toed shoes, because he was kicking that mouth. Anyway.
That's what it takes to
Mark
get
will
good
know what
images.
night I'm talking about, too. Or maybe not, I don't know.
That's hilarious.
So where's that on your list of workflow?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Put that in
that's
the
the first.
workflow list. Hey, are you having a good time? Oh, not tonight, buddy.
Yeah, yeah.
A little flow chart. Good time? No. Lawn chair.
yeah.
I think we ought to bring a lawn chair to every star party now and just put it
Yeah.
out, and we send them there when they.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's the timeout, chair. You know, we talk about failures and things like that, and you know, I'm sure we've all had nights where, you know, something's working okay and then it quits working, or you just can't get it to work. And what I've done in those situations, you know, one night I was out at Lee or at Green River. I can't remember which one for sure for this one, but my go-to stopped working for whatever reason at the time. And so I had my 11-inch out there in a dark night and dark sky, and the go-to quits working. And so what do? Well, I was frustrated for about 10 minutes because I couldn't figure out what. So then I just disconnected everything and did it manually. I mean, when I got home, I figured out what the problem was.
Yeah.
And it ended up being low voltage from a battery, because then it wouldn't drive it. So it had its own safety feature. But point is, I didn't waste the night. I just slewed the telescope manually like I used to way back when. Same thing on imaging. You know, some nights it's just not working
Yeah.
for whatever reason. And so here's the story for that one. So Mark Christensen and I were out at Lee looking at a comet, and it's the one I ended up making a movie of. I forgot the name of it now. But again, that night, things just weren't working. And this was with one of the intermediate celestron mounts, and it would work pretty good, but that night it just wasn't guiding. So I went to do the stack and track, where you just let it run and it automatically stacks the images that you're taking at the time. And I ended up with 3 really nice images of some galaxies. But then I went over to the comet and I just fixed on a couple of stars. And over 4 hours, 10 minutes, I took a 2-minute or whatever it was, a 30-second or 2-minute exposure of the comet. And when I was done, I had a 4-hour movie of the comet moving against the stars. So I just improvised that night, and it worked. So sometimes you've got to let go of your equipment failures, your equipment, whatever you're doing wrong, and like go back to a more common denominator of what you want to do, or what you know you can do,
Right.
so you don't waste your night. I mean, so those are two times where I remember everything came out pretty good, and was kind of surprised in one case that I got the movie out of it, you know.
Yeah.
One of the
And I
things that I
really-
have to compliment you about is I really like it when you make those animations. Those are terrific.
Yeah, and that's another one of my
Jupiters,
goals.
your-
Actually, that's my biggest goal for the planetary. The
Oh, yeah.
atmosphere around here is so unpredictable. I tried to get like the beautiful pictures of Saturn and Jupiter, and every once in a while it happens. But I much rather do the rotation of the planet, or the moons going in front of Jupiter and that type of thing. Not looking for like high quality color pictures of the planet, but okay, record something physical that's happening, and that's pretty cool like that. And I think on, like with Mars, what I did this last time, I took images like 3 or 4 days in a row, and then at the same time, and we got the rotation of the planet. It wasn't the actual rotation, but you know, the time lapse for each day. And that, again, that kind of stuff, we talked about doing it for yourself. That's what I wanted to see. It's okay, now I see that the planet has a different but close rotational period that the Earth does. Because remember when they were doing the things, and the people on Earth were on Mars time, monitoring things, and every few months they were like at a different time period on Earth when they were working, but they were in the same time period on Mars during the day. Am I saying that right?
think so. Getting
Anyway.
close.
Mars has got a 25-hour day,
Okay,
and every 25 days, we're back in sync.
yeah. Well, they run that rotation so that they run Mars sol time. And so every day on Earth was different to them when they showed up to work. But anyway, that's what I was after last year with the Mars thing is just showing so that's what I like to do with that. The other thing I really like to do is that mosaic of the different, either the object itself or the areas of the Milky Way. And actually that's what I want to end up doing with the DSLR. I want to do maybe use the 200 millimeter lens like I did in the past and just stitch together like the Milky Way around Cygnus or something like that, you know.
That is a perfect example of going to these meetings and seeing somebody do something that I didn't, I know that NASA can make mosaics. I didn't know we could.
Yeah.
And then I think it was Mark particularly that came in with a mosaic and I went right out and started doing that myself. It was amazing.
I mean, you could do it for the moon, you could do it for deep sky, you could do it for an individual object like the Rosette Nebula is good for that because that's just such a wide field object.
I didn't know we had the technology in our hands.
And then you could do that in Photoshop. It stitches together these things. And when I saw, I went to a conference and I saw that. I said, okay, that's for me.
What conference was that?
The imaging conference they used to have, the Midwest Imaging Conference. Herman and I were at that a few times.
Yeah.
I went there once.
Yeah. They had, I think one time it was at Hoffman Estates. And I forget where else, but yeah, I was with 2 or 3 of those.
Schaumburg or someplace like that.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where I learned that. And that's where I actually met the co-author of.
Oh, the guy, your A-Whip book?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Warren
Jim
Keller.
Burnell, yeah. I met,
Image processing.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great book.
Yeah.
I wonder if
And
they're back
then
together.
one more point on that, I guess, is that just like anything else, you can chase hardware and software in this hobby. Just like golf, guys buy new clubs all the time, trying to improve their game, et cetera, et cetera. As an example, but I was always under the thought that you should learn what you have as thorough as you can instead of trying to jump to the next program or jump to the next camera or whatever. My music teacher used to do that all the time when he used to have an Apple when it first came out in the 80s, and he would jump from one music program to another, never learn any of them. And then he told me about one and I got it and I learned it and I could do notation with it and music lessons with it. And he was like blown away. I said, well, all you have to do is sit here for 3 or 4 weeks and learn it, But I guess what I'm saying is that once you find a program that works for you, really learn it.
Right.
And then it's easier to branch off into a similar one or a parallel one because you know how it should work.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to do with the DSLR is learn which program of the deep sky stacker, and there's 2 or 3, right? And I'm trying to learn enough about each one, and then I'm going to stick with whatever one I like the best.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's good. All right, anyone else?
I got a little gizmo that might be off topic, but these, well, I probably can't
I've
see.
seen those. What do you think?
Those are the opera glasses.
Yeah, 2.1 magnification, 42 millimeter. My skies were very dark when I moved out here. They were like leaf, and now they're not quite as bad. They're not, nowhere near. But these things, just a little 2.1, you're amazed how many more stars you can see with your eyes.
That's
So
interesting.
when you're visually scanning the sky to see how good a night is it for astrophotography, if you got something like this on you, it'll look a lot better. You'll probably go out there and do something that you probably would have dropped the whole entire idea. And they're not, these are Symphony, what is SVBY, SVBONY.
Oh, yeah.
So they're not expensive, Amazon thing, you know, so.
Right.
Okay,
They actually work.
as soon as we get off of here, I've had my eye, I've had my eye on them for a while now. I'm gonna have my eyes in them.
Yeah, there's my eye on it, yeah. But it's a good way to help you find your target sometimes, or get this, check the
Yeah.
quality of the sky.
Yeah, I'll get my 14-year-old eyes back.
That's about it, yeah. It took cataract surgery for me to try that one.
All right. Well, if that's all we got, you could give maybe in the our group's IO, we could run some topics. What would be good next? But I kind of hope that we'll be able to get together soon, and whether it's at Lee or whether it's at Peck or whatever, and start doing things together. So.
And I think that, I for one would volunteer to meet with anybody in the club, either in my house or their house or somewhere else, and pick my brain and pick your brain and get ideas. I mean, why not? It's been a long time since we've done that stuff. So
Yeah, right.
I'm all for starting to do that, and and it's easy for me because I'm retired, so I can do it any night except Friday. I watch the grandkids.
Yeah, good for you. All right.
This is great. Thanks for bringing us back alive on Zoom.
Yeah, this is great.
I agree.
Thanks, Andy.
All right, you bet.